You're watching the Everything Network.
Bhupinder Bindy Johal was an Indo-Canadian gangster from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. A self-confessed drug trafficker, he was known for his outspoken nature, blatant disregard for authority, and his longtime rivalry with former mentors Ranjit Chima and the rival Punjabi mafia faction, led by the Dosanjh brothers and Ravi Kandola. Johal was born in 1971, although some sources have noted 1972 and 1973, in Punjab, India, to a Jat Sikh family of the Johal clan. His family immigrated to Vancouver, British Columbia with his parents at the age of 4. His parents separated, and he was raised by his mother. He was increasingly temperamental, resented discipline, and had a lack of respect and remorse for others. He suffered from severe depression when his parents cut his hair after an armed assault in Canada in the aftermath of the assassination of Indira Gandhi, which happened miles away in Delhi. His mother said, "That was the only time I saw another expression of his other than anger and silence." Bindy was considered to be a problem child by his teachers. One of his teachers, Rob Sandhu, stated, "When he came into the 8th grade, it didn't seem like he had any problems. It seems these kids are not being flagged. But teachers are raising these issues, so why aren't we acting on it?" Although he did well in school and was even on the honor roll, he was expelled from Sir Charles Tupper Secondary School and sentenced to 60 days in jail after he brutally assaulted his vice principal in 1989. He tried to justify his behavior at his trial in a defense that the journalist Jerry Langton wrote, smacked of cold-blooded cynicism, by saying that as an Indo-Canadian that he was the victim of a racist society, and he was only just lashing out against society by beating up his vice principal so severely that he had to go to the hospital emergency room to save his life. The judge at Johal's trial rejected this defense. The judge noted there was no evidence that the vice principal was a racist, and that whatever slights and insults he may have endured from others was no excuse for the assault. Having moved to Richmond, British Columbia, Johal enrolled in McNair Secondary School. He smashed in the window of a car using a baseball bat and was convicted of possession of a dangerous weapon. He enrolled in college but dropped out after his first semester and thus began his criminal career. He joined a once Hispanic gang called Los Diablos, the Devils. As the membership of Los Diablos became more Indo-Canadian, the gang was renamed as the Punjabi Mafia. He built a reputation as a hitman, working for Jimmy and Ron Dosanjh, both of whom he would later betray and have kill. Johal also started to sell cocaine. On March 14, 1991, a Colombian drug trafficker, Teodoro Salcedo, was murdered in Vancouver. Jimmy Dosanjh was arrested and charged with the murder. While Dosanjh was in jail awaiting his trial, which ended with his acquittal, Johal took advantage of his absence to make himself leader of the gang. Bindy and his gang hijacked trucks carrying electronics and automobiles, landed at the port of Vancouver, which he sold on the black market. A television documentary at the time estimated that Bindy Johal had an annual income of $4 million. He reportedly had antisocial personality disorder, which may account for why he was so quick to kill those close to him. He didn't keep close friends and was extremely callous to his associates. According to Constable Spencer, all he was concerned about was himself. He was very narcissistic in nature and had a general hatred of people. Bindy actually met Bal, one of his close associates, in prison when he was in his 20s. They never knew each other growing up, and from Bal's statements, Johal made it very clear that they were not friends, but business partners, as he did with everyone else in his group. He attended school with Ranjit Chima, who later became the Canadian Minister of Defense. Bindy Johal was responsible for the murders of gangster brothers Ron Dosanjh and Jimmy Dosanjh. Jimmy Dosanjh was killed in February 1994, and Ron was killed in April. Johal knew that Jimmy Dosanjh had taken out a contract to kill him for over $230,000, according to Crown prosecutors. The hitman whom Jimmy Dosanjh hired to kill Johal instead approached him and made a deal for more money to kill Dosanjh. On February 25, 1994, Dosanjh went into a back alley to inspect some stolen electronics that his men had taken when he was ambushed and killed by his own men, whose true loyalty was to Johal. As a result, after killing Jimmy Dosanjh, Johal stated, "This Jimmy Dosanjh, they portrayed him as a hitman. Personally, from what I've seen of him on the street, I don't think he could have hid his way out of a paper bag." This was a direct insult directed to Jimmy and Ron Dosanjh, claiming that they had stopped being hitmen themselves and were rarely doing their own dirty work after climbing to the top of their criminal organization. In a television interview, Ron Dosanjh told a television crew that if he saw Johal at his house, he'd shoot him between the eyes. Johal, when asked to comment about the remark by another television crew, snapped back, "Basically, I just want these guys to know you got another thing coming if they think that." On April 19, 1994, Ron Dosanjh was killed in his red pickup truck while waiting for a traffic light when a car pulled alongside his truck and a man opened fire with an AK-47 assault rifle. Dosanjh took several bullets to his face, killing him instantly, and his truck veered wildly as his foot was no longer on the brake, crashing into a tree. On April 24, 1994, Johal's neighbor, Greg Olson, who was walking his dog, was killed in a case of mistaken identity. On April 25, 1994, Bindy Johal was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the Dosanjh murders alongside Sarbjit Gill, Rajinder Benji, Michael Kim Budai, Sun News Lai, Peter Gill, and Kim Phil Hosik, whom the Crown alleged to be the actual gunmen who killed the Dosanjh brothers. Because of the required security for the trial, it was one of the most expensive trials in Canadian history. His former brother-in-law, Peter Gill, was also accused. The accused, including Gill and Johal, were acquitted. During and following the trial, Gill had an affair with Gillian Guess, an active juror on the trial. Guess was sentenced to 18 months after being convicted of obstruction of justice. Gill was tried and convicted of the same crime and sentenced to 6 years in prison. The Crown appealed the acquittal of Johal and other defendants, but Johal was killed before the new trial began. Gill was not retried. The Punjabi mafia is a criminal organization originating in British Columbia. The gang, initially being liberal in its membership, became more ethnocentric over time with the exception of some groups. The Punjabi mafia is loosely affiliated and consists of several groups which sometimes work together. These groups are still active and notorious in Vancouver and have been since the early 1990s. They have been linked to the Independent Soldiers, Red Scorpions, Lotus Triads, Hells Angels, and the United Nations Gang in Canada, although several members of the Independent Soldiers can also be grouped as part of the mafia as well. Bindy Johal was accepted into the Punjabi mafia in the early 1990s, most likely through Ranjit Chima or Ron Dosanjh. Ranjit Chima and Ron Dosanjh were among the few who had full control of the criminal organization. According to Johal's former lieutenant, Buttar admitted to performing several executions alongside Bindy, as well as the unsuccessful attempt to kill Johal's associate and former brother-in-law, Peter Gill. However, Buttar was shocked when Bindy said he wanted his own cousin killed. "I thought this guy was kidding, but he was actually being serious about taking his cousin out." Buttar was suspected of being behind the hit on Robbie Candola outside his Cole Harbour penthouse. He believed Candola was the one responsible for his younger brother's death. He is also suspected to be the one behind Bindy's death. It is still up for debate whether he was killed because Baal feared Bindy would kill him or because Ranj and other major players turned on him. He was charged with aggravated assault for beating two men in a bar with a broken beer bottle in 1997. When imprisoned, Johal was labeled a menace to society. Bindy Johal was earning allegedly over $500,000 a week in his prime through various illegal activities, including murder for hire, drug dealing, and debt collecting. He was also affiliated with the Buttar brothers, who were well known across the lower mainland for their brutal gangland slayings. Johal coldly told Bal Buttar, "You listen to me. If you take care of things at your end, I'll be happy with you, brother. If you fuck me over, I'll kill you. All right?" Bindy Johal's chosen problem solver was a hit squad which he named the Elite, consisting of 5 Indo-Canadian hitmen. Buttar later stated that the Elite hit squad was responsible for 25 murders over a 5-year period. Bindy also had a legendary bad temper and was known for his frequent outbursts of violent rage, which led him to be convicted in 1997 of attacking 2 men in a bar fight with a broken beer bottle. He had convictions for obstruction of justice, possession of dangerous weapons, and aggravated assault. A Chinese-Canadian rival drug dealer, Randy Chan, was kidnapped on October 25, 1996. Reportedly, Chan had been kidnapped by Roman Man, one of Johal's associates. Man was angry with the quality of the cocaine that Chan had just sold him, which he stated was very diluted despite the premium price. Chan was held captive for 50 or 56 hours, part of which was spent in an automobile trunk. Johal phoned Chan's older brother, Raymond, to tell him that if he wanted to see his brother alive again, to give him 5 kilograms of cocaine in exchange for his brother's life. Johal negotiated Chan's release with his brother to be in exchange for $500,000 paid by the Lotus Triads to the Punjabi mafia faction of Bindy Johal. Chan's brother was Raymond Chan, a gang member of the Chinese criminal organization called the Lotus. Johal made no effort to disguise the fact that he was a gangster and would threaten the lives of rivals in interviews with television crews. He became a folk hero in the lower mainland, being admired for his success as a gangster, and many of the young men who joined organized crime admitted that it was Johal's example that inspired them to turn to crime. One gangster who wished to remain anonymous told the academic Arthur J. Pass, "To many young people in the immigrant community who feel that Canadian society does not give them enough chance to succeed, joining gangsters is an exercise in building their self-esteem." Why do you think Bindy Johal was a hero to many young Indo-Canadians? His legend had spread wide in the past few years among Indians, not only here but also in Toronto and Montreal, New York and San Francisco. He stood up to his school principals, he beat up those who called him racial names, and he was making a lot of money even though he was in his mid-20s. He drove fancy cars, he had girls falling over him. His gang was responsible for several murders. The first one killed was Amarjit Singh Dale, who was shot dead while leaving the Marpole Oak Ridge Community Center on January 19, 1997, after watching a hockey game. Dale was an associate of the Dosanjh brothers, and Johal wanted to see all of the associates of the Dosanjh brothers killed, lest they try to avenge them. On October 21, 1997, the Elite killed Gurinder Singh Kun as he was leaving his home. Kun had attended high school alongside Johal and considered him a friend. Johal, in a moment of paranoia, was convinced that Kun was involved in the Olsen murder, which led him to order Kun's murder. On July 1, 1998, Johal had the Elite kill Venus News Mackenzie. The reason for Mackenzie's murder was eliminate a romantic rival for the affections of a woman who preferred Mackenzie over Johal. On September 19, 1998, a member of the gang, Derek Chand Shankar, insulted Johal, calling him an idiot and a baby, after Johal stated he was too tired to go to a nightclub. Later the same night, Johal showed up at the nightclub and asked where Shankar was. Buttar stated that he was drunk and sleeping in a truck in the parking lot. Despite knowing that Johal was planning to kill Shankar, Buttar drove the truck to the Queensborough Bridge in New Westminster. As Shankar was waking up from his stupor, Johal shot him. On November 29, 1998, Johal's associate, Roman Danny Mann, expressed the wish to leave the gang, leading to Johal to punch him out in fury. Later the same night, Mann's body was found in an empty industrial lot in Burnaby, with a single bullet through his head. When Buttar asked Johal about the murder, he stated, "Blame it on the Hells Angels." Johal then asked Buttar to hit the nightclub with him. On Sunday, December 20th, 1998, Johal was dancing at the Palladium nightclub in Vancouver when he was shot from behind at 4:30 a.m. He was rushed to Vancouver General Hospital, where he died 4 hours later. No witnesses were able to describe the assailant. 4 months before Johal's death, at least 3 of Johal's associates had also been killed, with each killing alleged to be connected to Bindy, according to the confessions of Bal Buttar. In 2004, before he died, Bal told a reporter that he ordered the assassination of Johal, fearing that if he didn't do it, Johal would have had him murdered. The kidnapping trial was set to commence within 2 months of his murder. Buttar would have served up to 10 years if he had been convicted. Buttar was never convicted in the murder of Johal due to his blind and quadriplegic state. Johal was identified as one of the individuals in the Punjabi Canadian community who sought criminal activity as a means of fast success and fast money, and a glamorized lifestyle, and to counter racial discrimination and abuse with counter-violence. To many young people in the immigrant community who feel that Canadian society does not give them enough chance to succeed, joining gangsters is an exercise in building their self-esteem. Why do you think Bindy Johal was a hero to many young Indo-Canadians? His legend had spread wide in the past few years among Indians, not only here, but also in Toronto and Montreal, New York, and San Francisco. He stood up to his school principals. He beat up those who called him racial names. And he was making a lot of money, even though he was in his mid-20s. He drove fancy cars. He had girls falling all over him. He was a gangster who asked for anonymity.
You're watching the Everything Network.
The Independent Soldiers, otherwise known as the IS Gang, is an organized crime group based in British Columbia, Canada, that is engaged in organized crime across the nation and in Canadian prisons. The Independent Soldiers are a gang that was said to have been formed by a group of Indo-Canadians from South Vancouver and Metro Vancouver municipalities. They had come together during the 1990s under the name Sunset Boys. The Sunset Boys were a group of mostly Indo-Canadians whose favorite meeting was the Sunset Community Center and Sunset Park. One of the founding members of the Sunset Boys, who later became the leader of the Independent Soldiers, was Randy Naker. The gang were initially petty criminals, but started to work for the Punjabi mafia in the 1990s as street-level drug dealers. As the group chose to assert its independence after the murder of Bindy Johal in 1998, the name Independent Soldiers was chosen as a way to emphasize their independence from the Punjabi mafia. Like most gangs in the Lower Mainland, the members of the Independent Soldiers came mostly from middle-class families, which was not the norm with the rest of Canada. The colors of the Independent Soldiers are red and black. Members of the gang wear red and black clothing in public, together the initials IS stamped on their jackets and baseball hats. Naker founded the Independent Soldier clothing brand in 2004. Naker, an Indo-Fijian immigrant, always insisted that the Independent Soldiers were just a clothing line he had started, and he had nothing to do with crime. The Canadian scholar Mark Totten wrote the Independent Soldiers gang were typical of the gangs in the Lower Mainland, which started out as an ethnocentric gang and became more diverse with the passage of time. Totten wrote the Independent Soldiers were mostly a single-generational gang, were not especially territorial, and did not have the elaborate rituals that other gangs had. Totten wrote the Independent Soldiers were a mid-level gang in the Lower Mainland, and together with the Red Scorpions and the United Nations gangs are one of the largest gangs in the Vancouver area. Totten noted the Independent Soldiers were an unstable gang with a fluid membership and frequent leadership changes. The gang is organized in cells and primarily sells cocaine. By the early 2000s, the favorite meeting place for the leaders of the Independent Soldiers were the Loft 6 nightclub in Gastown. The Independent Soldiers in the Loft 6 nightclub were involved in a shootout with the Hells Angels in August of 2003 on the dance floor, sparked by the presence of John Johnson, a man associated with the Hells Angels who had beaten up an Independent Soldier earlier that year. One witness recalled, "A fight broke out, and all of a sudden bullets started flying. We just ran. We were right in the line of fire. We couldn't see anybody. We didn't know who was shooting, and people began crawling over top of each other to get out of the way." When the shootout was over, 3 people had been killed and 8 were wounded. Johnson was killed alongside Mahmoud Al-Khalil of the Independent Soldiers and John Popovich, the DJ at the club, who was killed in the crossfire. Independent Soldier Gurpal Singh Paul Dosanjh, the first cousin to the Dosanjh brothers, was shot in the head but survived his wound, albeit with serious brain damage. Dosanjh was murdered in March 2004 while eating at the Gourmet Castle restaurant in Vancouver. After the Loft 6 incident, many of the original members of the gang ended leaving the gang as it was felt to be too dangerous. The new members who joined the gang were much willing to work for the Hells Angels, and the journalist Jerry Langton wrote, "The Independent Soldiers steadily became less and less independent. At the same time, the Independent Soldiers became more multi-ethnic, with the influx of new members. The Independent Soldiers were reduced down to being a puppet gang for the Hells Angels. Randy Naker was one of the pro-angel leaders of the Independent Soldiers and emerged as a major force within the gang by 2005. When a puppet gang for the Hells Angels in Prince George known as the Crew were broken up by police arrests, the Hells Angels had the Independent Soldiers establish a chapter in Prince George as the replacement puppet gang for the Crew. The Prince George chapter of the IS were made up of mostly white or First Nations people. The Independent Soldier chapter in Prince George came to dominate the drug trade in that city, alongside the Renegades, who were also Hells Angels flunkies, which led to a rivalry with the Game-Tight Soldiers. The Game-Tight Soldiers disbanded, with some joining the Renegades, with the rest moving to Winnipeg to join the Rock Machine. The first leader of the gang, Sukhvinder Singh Dosanjh, was killed in an automobile accident in 2005. By 2005, the IS were operating across British Columbia and Alberta. The IS was mainly made up of Punjabi Canadians, but over the years they became more multicultural and accepted other ethnicities in the lower ranks as the Independent Soldiers. In January 2005, Randy Naker, along with Harpreet Narwal, Roman Narwal, and Sarpreet Johal, had kidnapped and beat Harpreet Singh after he refused to pay extortion money to the Independent Soldiers. On December 7, 2006, Naker, together with Independent Soldier Barry Espadilla, were arrested attending a gang meeting at the Castle Fun Park in Abbotsford after a passerby noticed one of the men had a handgun on him. Also arrested at the Castle Fun Park meeting that evening were Jamie Bacon along with Anton Huytes-Mersing, Justin Prince, Dennis Karbovanek, and Jeff Harvey of the Red Scorpions. The Castle Fun Park meeting was a part of a takeover of the Red Scorpions by the Hells Angels, with Bacon acting as their proxy. Langton wrote the Independent Soldiers were a gang that had once been all Indian-Canadian, but had since become just another Hells Angel puppet club. Both Naker and Espadilla were representing the Angels at the Castle Fun Park meeting. On the 9th of August 2007, the Fortune Happiness restaurant in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Vancouver was the scene of a shooting. Two masked gunmen stormed into the Fortune Happiness and opened fire on a group eating at a table. 2 men were killed while 6 were wounded. The well-known gangster Hung Van Sonny Bui took 6 bullets in his chest, but survived his wounds. The attack is believed to have been the work of the independent soldiers. As the Hells Angels took control, the independent soldiers, 2 members, namely Michael Justin Lal and his brother Corey Jason Lal, both left the independent soldiers to found their own gang, the Lal Crew. The Lal Crew were wiped out in the Surrey 6 massacre of October 2007. On the 15th of April 2008, Joseph J. Money Krantz, the owner and manager of World Extreme Fighting Club, was arrested by the police. Found inside of his home were 4.5 ounces of cocaine, 2 ounces of heroin, 8.7 ounces of crack, a .38U handgun, a 9mm handgun plus clothing and paraphernalia bearing the logos of the independent soldiers and the Hells Angels. It was later confirmed that Krantz was a member of the independent soldiers and that his World Extreme Fighting Club was popular with the independent soldiers. On October 20th, 2008, Krantz was locking the doors of his Extreme Fighting Club in Abbotsford at about 9 p.m. when he was shot dead. It is believed he was killed out of the fear that he might make a plea bargain with the Crown for a reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against his suppliers. During the ensuing gang war for control of the drug trade in the Lower Mainland, the independent soldiers served as proxies for the Hells Angels. On August 6, 2008, a shooting took place on Upland Street in Prince George with a man known as WB due to a court order being seriously injured. Arrested and charged for the shooting were 3 independent soldiers, namely Jesse Bird, Eric West, and Fabian Charlie, while another 3 independent soldiers were arrested but not charged. The fact that the 3 who not charged were all white, while the 3 who were charged were all First Nations people, became the object of some dispute in the Prince George media. 2 of the witnesses to the shooting, Garrett McComb and his girlfriend Brittany Geese, were found murdered inside their house on October 7, 2008, being shot several times. In October of 2009, Justice Karen Walker dismissed the charges against West, Bird, and Charlie after WB refused to testify, while she found that the Crown's sole remaining witness to be unreliable. The leader of the independent soldiers, Parminder Singh Peter Adiwal, was shot several times and badly wounded in an attack by a member of the Red Scorpions gang in April 2009 that left him a paraplegic. In April 2009, Naker became the new leader of the independent soldiers. While in jail following his arrest at the Castle Fun Park meeting, he had a member of the United Nations gang beaten in his cell block. Following his conviction for the assault and kidnapping of Harpreet Happy Singh in 2005, Naker was sentenced to a prison term. Naker admitted while applying for parole that he was the man behind the independent soldiers' clothing brand, but he denied being a gangster, saying that his business had been ruined when independent soldiers' gangsters started wearing his branded clothing without his permission. Naker was able to make day parole, but the parole board did not accept his claim to be an innocent businessman who was only guilty of only making clothing popular with gangsters, denying him full parole. While Naker was living at a halfway house in Vancouver, as part of his day parole, 2 armed men burst into the house on September 29, 2009, and stated that they were looking for Naker, who just left accordingly to the sign-out book for a local convenience store. The clerk had mistaken Naker for Raj Sumal. The 2 gunmen raced over to the convenience store and shot Sumal dead out of the belief that he was Naker. Ken Yaretz was a drug dealer in Kamloops who during a police stop in August 2008 had been found inside of the car of James Russell, the president of the Kamloops chapter of the Independent Soldiers. Yaretz, together with his best friend Damian Marks, had just moved into a new basement apartment when both men went missing on April 17, 2009. In May 2009, the corpses of Marks and Yaretz were found buried on grounds of the house at Noof Lake owned by Roy Fraser. It was stated by locals that it was common knowledge that Fraser was a drug dealer whose remote house had a marijuana grow-opt owned by the Hells Angels. Fraser was charged with murder but fled while on bail. On December 14, 2013, Fraser was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder in regard to Yaretz's death and 1 count of second-degree murder in regard to Marks's death. Brittany Irving of Kelowna was a 24-year-old healthcare professional who was addicted to OxyContin. To pay for her addiction, she worked as a marijuana dealer for both the local chapters of the Independent Soldiers and the Hells Angels. On the 6th of April 2010, she went to meet an Independent Soldier drug dealer, Jolan Joey Verma, and vanished. Her corpse was discovered by the police on May 25, 2010. During the police investigation of Irving's murder, Verma rammed a gun into the belly of another man, Mike Roberts, and told him, "You have to take the fall for this Irving murder. If you don't, I have no choice but to kill you, your wife, your children, and your grandchildren. I'm sorry, that's just how we do business." Verma was charged with her murder. On October 17, 2013, Verma was convicted of Irving's murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no chance of parole. Verma broke down hysterically in tears as the guilty verdict was announced in the courtroom. After Russell was arrested, the new president of the Independent Soldier Kamloops chapter was Jeffrey Oldford. Oldford had been convicted of theft in April 2010, while also facing charges of sexual assault late in December 2010 and another for trafficking in April of 2011. On August 5, 2011, a group of men armed with guns and baseball bats broke into the house of a small-time drug dealer, Steve Bodie. Steve was robbed and beaten bloody with the bones in his chest, hands, and fingers all being broken. He was dumped by a highway in the Rocky Mountains and finally had one of his hands run over by a truck. After he went to a farmhouse to report the attack, the police entered Steve's house and found 2 independent soldiers looking for drugs. The police charged Oldford together with Adam Colligan, Brett Haynes, Greg Brotzel, and David Byford of the Independent Soldiers. Ranjit Chima was born in 1968 to a Jat Sikh family of the Chima clan in the small village of Chima Kurd, Jalandhar district, Punjab, India. During his childhood, Chima moved with his family to England and then to British Columbia, arriving at the latter location in October 1978 when he was 10 years old. According to Chima, his father Malkit was abusive and suffered from alcoholism, and his family was poor. Chima worked with his mother in Fraser Valley berry farms during summer break from the ages of 10 to 15, following which he worked as a janitor at night while attending high school. After graduating from high school in 1986, he went to college, studying criminal justice while working as a bouncer and then as a truck driver. He claimed that he wanted to become a police officer while in college. Ranjit Chima pleaded guilty to a nightclub shooting where he intimidated some men over a woman named Monica Alvarez at a Southwest Marine Drive nightclub on November 19, 1993. As it was alleged by her that the men had bumped into her and caused trouble, which caused Ranjit to intervene on her behalf. Prior to this, he had no criminal record. In the May 1995 trial of Bhupinder Bindy Johal, who was accused of murdering gangster brothers Jimmy Singh Dosanjh and Ranjit Ran Singh Dosanjh, Chima was identified as an associate of Johal and a major drug distributor involved in cocaine trafficking. In August 1995, Chima was shot at the Zodiac Karaoke nightclub in Richmond, British Columbia. At the time of the shooting, he was with Manjinder Rabi Singh Kandola, a founder of the Independent Soldiers gang. The two would later fall out, and Kandola would be killed in 2002, a murder believed to be ordered by Chima. In 1998, the United States charged Chima of attempting to smuggle heroin and hashish from Pakistan to California and exchange it with Colombian gangs for cocaine. He would not be extradited for another decade, as he filed numerous appeals. At a May 2000 wedding in Vancouver, attended by Chima and by then Premier Ujjal Dosanjh, Chima's bodyguard Mike Brar was killed. After investigating Chima following Brar's murder, Vancouver Sun reporter Kim Bolan found that he had not been arrested on a charge for assault in Burnaby. Chima was then arrested but released after the complainant died. In 2008, Chima was finally extradited to the United States, where he pleaded guilty. MP Sukhminder Sukh Singh Dhaliwal faced controversy after writing to a U.S. District Court judge on official House of Commons stationery in support of Chima. Chima was imprisoned in California until being released in 2012, when he returned to Vancouver and attempted to return to drug smuggling. He was killed on May 2, 2012, in a targeted drive-by shooting, just 3 months after being released from prison for the attempted sale of 200 kilograms of heroin. According to crime journalist Kim Bolan and her police sources, since returning from a California prison 3 months ago, longtime Vancouver gangster Ranjit Chima had been trying to muscle his way back into the lucrative BC drug trade before he was gunned down Wednesday. In the process, Chima disrespected some of his former underlings who have moved up in the business since the 43-year-old went to jail. Some close to Chima, as well as police sources, believe recent disputes with old associates could have led to the gangland execution of the former South Slope crime boss in front of his parents' house on East 61st Avenue. He was trying to step into his old role, one friend said. He didn't realize that things have changed. He is survived by a wife and daughter.
If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.